Africa. It is the weekly G20 feature, which we bring you in association with SAFM, the National Pulse with Ashraf Garda. And this afternoon, we'll be looking at the I-20, that's Immigration 20, and what it proposes as far as immigration is concerned and the value that it can actually bring to developing economies as well as felicitating social cohesion. Also in this hour, we'll take a look at the jobs in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa. They're currently experiencing a severe economic and employment crisis. More about that as we're joined by the national spokesperson for the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Kosatu Zanele Sabela. That and a whole lot more coming up this afternoon. And of course, including our C-Suite feature. It's exactly 8 minutes after 4 p.m.
We are on Open Views Audio Bouquet, Channel 628.
Now, the Culture Summit Africa 2025 has heard how African organizations are rethinking the role of culture in driving performance. More than 200 leaders and HR professionals gathered in Johannesburg, South Africa, for the first summit of its kind on the continent, focusing exclusively on organizational culture. The summit was designed to be a platform for ongoing dialogue about how organizations build culture that drives performance. Nhlanhla Mahlangu attended the summit and filed this report.
Culture Summit Africa brought together executives, HR leaders and culture practitioners to explore how values, purpose and people create performance. It featured 29 speakers over 2 days with delegates from South Africa, Namibia, Uganda and Mauritius. For African businesses facing rapid change, the summit created a space to share practical lessons and measurable outcomes from companies that are living their culture every day. Adash Grewal, Head of Talent Development and Culture at Constance Hotels and Resorts in Mauritius, says it's important to have leaders who listen.
You're not going to be successful if your people are not together. You're not going to be successful if your people are not living the same values that you preach or living the very DNA of your business. And that happens only through culture. So it's extremely important to get leaders to understand culture, understand the importance of culture. And what I would really like in events like this is to see not just HR people attending, but to see heads of departments and general managers attending, because a leader is not your HR manager. A leader can sit anywhere in the organization, but everybody needs to kind of understand culture and understand the importance of culture.
Laurel Feljun, Head of Culture and Leadership at Capricorn Group in Namibia, says leadership is the most important role in organizational culture.
Everything starts from the top. People look up to leaders. Leaders embody everything. As a leader, you have got control and you are responsible for your whole team. You've got to set the example as a leader. You've got to live out and be an example of what is possible. You cannot say one thing and do another, and your team is continuously looking up to you for guidance. And if you don't live the culture and do things the right way, there's no way it will permeate into your team. They'll just think you're unauthentic, you're not living up to it, and we need leaders to take the forefront in this, because ultimately they are the holder of the people.
Abdul Makubuya, Senior Manager of Organizational Development at National Social Security Fund in Uganda, says ongoing dialogue about how organizations build culture can drive performance.
If you look at the changes within the organization, the multi-generational workforce, culture has become a key aspect if any organization is to move forward. You may have a good strategy, but if you do not have good behaviors, because culture is basically behaviors, you'd still fail. Culture is a living aspect. If you have had culture for the last 20 years, the same culture, the business world is changing. If you don't revisit it to see whether it's still relevant, you may miss out. I earlier said that we have a multi-generational workforce. We have millennials, we have the next generation. They are fast moving, but if the organization is not as fast moving as they expect, then you miss out. So your culture is supposed to be accommodative of the differences within us that make us the best employees we can be.
The summit explored how culture underpins performance, purpose, and transformation. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Ntlanhla Mahlangu in Johannesburg.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et votre 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa and SAFM, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
Well, so many different angles to talk about in the build-up to G20. How about this one, in this collaboration between SAFM and Channel Africa with myself and Thami Ngubeni? Now, the group of 20, so G20, right, as they continue to seek solutions to migration challenges related to legal pathways, displaced populations, and the aging workforce in many member countries, and the new digital visa system we're well aware of, policing and policies addressing foreign national employment, and enhanced border security measures being implemented, it's now become even more important to ensure that the voices of those who are mostly impacted by these changes are heard. Thami?
And so true, Ashraf. And one of the things that we cannot change, that this is the new order of the world. You know, immigration is the status quo, and migrants are key parts of communities and economies around the world. There is the Al-Kabulan Immigrants Impact Awards, the AIIA. They're set to host the Immigration 20, that's the I-20 summit. This happens over a 2-day period from the 9th to the 10th of October. So that's coming up really soon. And they do this to amplify the voices of immigrants as well as refugees in global policy dialogues. And these are voices that are often marginalized and voices that are not often heard. So AIIA says that immigration needs to be positioned as a catalyst for economic growth, social cohesion and sustainable development, and all of this within the G20 framework. For more on this afternoon, we're joined by Debu Gordon Nwajang, the COO and co-owner of the Al-Kabulan Immigrants Impact Awards.
Let's just do that by bringing that first thought around this one here is, it's such an important issue to deal with. So take us through some of the key immigration issues that you would like to highlight in the summit, which effectively I would think reflect some of the most pressing challenges too.
Ashraf, good day and good day to all the listeners of SAFM. So I think for AIA, the question of migration is something that cannot be neglected at all. We're sitting at about 304 million migrants globally. And when you look at it from a perspective that almost all G20 countries besides India are immigrants receiving countries, it is important for us that as when G20 member states sit around the table, they develop frameworks that would guide how migrant exporting nations get to send their citizens across to their countries. And if they get to do that properly, then you would have less instances of irregular movement of people. You would have less instances of abuse of women and girls in these countries. But more importantly, you would have less instances of where you have strong anti-immigrant sentiments. I think most countries would explain that the immigrant sentiments that get expressed on the street is probably because of not well-managed migration within the G20 member states. So the reason why for us this gathering is important is to showcase, first of all, the value of migration. I mean, if you look at the G20 member states, the migrants contribute almost about $6.4 trillion to GDP. If you were to look at the number of entrepreneurs and CEOs that are from third world countries that are leading corporations in G20 member states, you would be shocked to learn that almost about 80% of the CEOs that sit at the top 100 companies in the world are from migrant nations. So it is important that this potential is harnessed. It is important that this potential is given attention. And also, with the increased number of people that are wanting to move around the continent, especially within the African continent, it is important that South Africa really decides how it wants to manage migration. I mean, luckily we have a Minister of Home Affairs that is very proactive, who is actively stating that, listen, migrants add value, but more importantly, that migration needs to be managed in such a way that everybody that is in the country is documented, everybody that is in the country can be identified. So I think for us, the I-20 is all about putting that question on the table and ensuring that migration is not left as a side issue when it's time for elections and campaigns.
And I must say, Tibo, it really is quite an innovative way of looking at the immigration question, because it's not often framed in that particular narrative. And one of the things that you've said, and one of the reasons that you say you've come up with the Immigration 20 Summit, is to amplify the voices of immigrants as well as refugees in global policy dialogues. Do you feel that those voices, the voices of immigrants, of refugees, are not heard in the G20 discussions?
I think the voices are heard to a certain extent, and I think if you look at the work being done by the IOM, the UNHCR, the ISS, so the voices are heard. The voices that are not heard are the voices of migrants that are doing exceptionally well in countries that they have adopted as their host countries. Take, for example, if you were to look at societies like the US, Canada, Australia, the Middle East, if you look at Saudi Arabia, these are countries that are run mostly on immigrant level. Now, when the question of migration is discussed, sadly, there is no platform that says, yes, migrants add value. Yes, migrants are part and parcel of our economic society, and we should put in place a framework to strengthen social cohesion between the migrant population and the host population. And I think for us, the focus is how do we discuss publicly and appreciate the fact that migrants play an important role, and there should be mechanisms in place that tell average citizens in those countries that we need migrants, we need qualified migrants, and more importantly, we should have framework to welcome refugees, especially those that come from societies that are ravaged by war and abuse.
Well, interesting you use the word mechanisms, because I understand the African peer review mechanism has provided the type of assistance that you need. So tell me about this collaboration and how it may well impact the end goals.
So our work with the African peer review mechanism is based on the fact that they have a very strong interest on the governance of migration. Now, countries like Uganda have done exceptionally well in light of that. So when you go into Uganda, they have a really good framework that allows the refugee population to integrate freely with the local citizens of Uganda. I mean, they are able to do business, they are able to trade freely, they are able to open accounts. So they literally almost become citizens of Uganda, except for the fact that on their documents you would realize that they are refugees. So what is important, I mean, it's funny, I think 2 weeks ago I got news, and the questions of migration in the UK was discussed. And one of the panelists said, you know, we need to learn from countries that have done this well. We cannot receive migrants and put them in refugee camps or host them in hotels. Migrants should be allowed to work. Refugees that are skilled should be allowed to integrate into industries so that they can be part of the economy. If you receive qualified migrants, you should be able to use them in your own economy and grow your economy. I mean, there is research that says that the migrant group has a high percentage of education than the host populations in G20 member states. So you are literally receiving extremely qualified and dynamic people, and they should be put into use to grow their host and local economies.
Tim, I'm quite interested to find out when you actually began the awards. And is this your first meeting? And if so, how are you going to ensure that the outcomes of this meeting are indeed incorporated in the G20 framework that's set to be tabled in November? And I ask this, and if you could, at the back of that, also focus on whether or not this is Afrocentric. Is this immigration issue, quote unquote, used to focus on Africa and Africans, or is this more of a global approach to immigration?
Thank you very much. I think let me tackle your questions. So the I-20 Summit is the first time we are doing it, but from an organizational perspective, we've existed since 2023. So we initially started with the award ceremony just to recognize immigrants that are making a positive impact within the communities in South Africa. So as we did that, we then realized that there is a need to do more than just the award, because social cohesion cannot be left to an award ceremony. We then went on to interact with the different migrant groups, and we put together the Global Heritage Festival, where we allow migrant groups to participate in art, in music, in cuisine, so that the average South African can get to interact with the different migrant groups and thereby get to understand exactly where they come from and probably why they are in this country. As for how we are going to ensure that our deliberations at the I-20 get incorporated in the G20. So the Akebo and Immigrant Impact Award has been appointed as a coordinator for the People-to-People Solidarity Working Group within the G20. So it is within that framework that we as the I-20 are putting together the summit. So whatever deliberations, whatever participations takes place within the I-20, we are hoping that those discussions will be captured and then reported to the C20 at the C20 conference within the G20, so that the angle of migration is not left as a side issue.
All right, very well understood. Well, thank you so much for that insight, and really looking forward to seeing what comes out of that, the Immigration Summit that's taking place from the 9th to the 10th of October. All this as a build-up to the big G20 Summit taking place in November.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
That was Tibo Gordon Nwanjang. He's the COO and co-owner of the Al Kalbulan Immigrants Impact Awards, taking place from the 9th to the 10th of October. Well, that's how we come to the end of our G20 feature for this Thursday with Ashraf Garda on the National Pulse and SAFM. It's gone exactly 27 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African Time.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Wewe ni mjasiriamali unajihusisha na biashara ya kuuza dawa.
Jaribu kutuambia kwanza, kwa nini ulianzisha biashara hiyo?
Tutasema kwamba maisha ya kila siku ni kwamba mtu anapashwa kuwa na maisha ya kuweza kujitegemea. Usitegemee kuajiriwa, lakini utegemee kujiajiri, na baadaye utaweza ukaajiri wengine. Na hiyo ilinipa msukumo mkubwa kwa kuweza kujiajiri na kampuni hii kwa ajili ya kuweza kuwasaidia wale ambao wanahangaika zaidi.
Unauza aina gani ya dawa?
Unasema ni dawa, lakini kwetu sisi tunaita kama vile ni pipi, ambayo ni virutubisho ambavyo vinakwenda kusaidia kwa wale ambao wanatatizwa na aina tofauti ya magonjwa.
Virutubisho hivyo sasa vinatibu magonjwa gani?
Virutubisho hivi vinatunza magonjwa kama vile ya kisukari, shinikizo la damu.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Get the news, music, and lifestyle of Africa on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Still coming up for you on Africa in Business on this Thursday afternoon, we host Victor Nemukula in our C-suite. He's the managing director of Shumani Industrial Equipment. It is a company that's based in South Africa, focusing on industrial and construction equipment. We'll find out more about his journey, why it is that sales and marketing is just the thing that makes him tick, as well as the recently launched locally branded forklift range Bega. So he'll be telling us about that milestone as well. Also, under our radar today, the Eastern Cape province in South Africa experiencing a severe economic and employment crisis. We'll be speaking to the union COSATU regarding that. It is now 29 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time as we head over now to the markets desk where Nosipho Zuma is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Good afternoon. In your business news, the SAWA, $1 is trading at 17 Rand 51 in South Africa. In Botswana is trading at 13 Bula 295. In Namibia, it is trading at 17 Namibian dollars 509. The Zambian kwacha is trading at 24 kwacha 077 to the US dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 424. In Ethiopia, it is trading at 143 birr 528. In Uganda, it is trading at 3,000 shilling 490. And in Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 476. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 508. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 48 Egyptian pound or 5. In Tunisia, it is trading at 2 dinar 901. In Algeria, it is trading at 128 dinar 983. The Moroccan dirham is trading at 8,919 to the US dollar. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 911 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,855 to the US dollar. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,636 and platinum at $1,388 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $66.84 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here is Figile Lingwate.
Sports on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Good afternoon, Thami. In the business of sport, we begin with SASCOC, South African Sports Confederation and Olympic Committee. SASCOC says the decision by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture to cut funding by approximately $2.3 million without prior notification is in breach of multi-year funding agreements. These agreements were individually entered into between national federations and the Department of Sport.
SASCOC CEO Nozipho Jafta says despite engagements with Minister Gayton McKenzie and his department, the status quo remains. She's called on the department to reverse its decision so that SASCOC could deliver on its mandate. If it's not resolved in time, it could also have serious implications for SASCOC's high-performance mandate and the existence of some federations. Codes such as athletics and swimming have been hit by 60% cuts, while SASCOC has received nothing.
And ArcelorMittal Liberia has strengthened its backing for Liberia sports with the signing of a 3-year sponsorship agreement with the Liberia Marathon Trust, committing more than $30,000 annually as a grand sponsor of the national marathon. The memorandum of understanding was signed at ArcelorMittal's Monrovia offices, signaling a new phase in the company's long-standing partnership with the Liberia Marathon Trust to promote athletics and foster national unity. Of that amount, $250,000 were directly to the Ministry of Youth and Sports, while the rest supported countries where ArcelorMittal operates. And Netball South Africa NSA acting president Mame Diale says the under-21 netball team known as the Baby Proteas will be rewarded as per their agreement. The experienced administrator confirmed to the national broadcaster that players will receive daily allowances and incentives depending on where they finish. Diale explained that while Baby Proteas players are not on contracts or monthly salaries like the senior Proteas, their efforts at the World Cup will be rewarded.
Although I would not divulge as to who gets how much, but we look at the hierarchy. Obviously head coach is important and will be given much more than the assistant coach, and also the team manager. We pay the team manager, and in terms of the team, the players and all that, we do give them daily allowances, and the support team management. Those are professionals. And they've got their own rates, to say that this is what we are charging you per day, and that's what we are paying as Netball South Africa.
And the South African Minister of Sports, Gayton McKenzie, says the long wait for the much talked about video assistant referee, the VAR, is over. McKenzie says he has made money available for the VAR. This after Bafana shared the spoils with their nemesis Nigeria in Bloemfontein in the World Cup qualifiers. Nigeria scored a controversial equalizer through defender Calvin Bassey on the stroke of halftime. And as a result, McKenzie has called on the South African Football Association to expedite the introduction of VAR in South Africa.
That was a handball. Let's be honest about it. We need VAR. Let me tell you, I made the money available in the budget. FIFA rules require SAFA to do it. SAFA has been doing a brilliant job in doing it. They are now at the adjudication process. It is out of Mackenzie's hands, out of Mother's hands. We've done our part.
And we end with tennis news. Unrepentant Australian Davis Cup captain Leighton Hewitt has vowed to appeal against a 2-week suspension for shoving a doping control official, hitting out at the timing of the decision. The former world number one was slapped with a sanction and a $19,800 fine on Wednesday following an independent tribunal ruling under the tennis anti-doping program. The International Tennis Integrity Agency says he was charged in January after pushing a 60-year-old volunteer anti-doping chaperone following Australia's Davis Cup semi-final defeat to Italy in Spain 2 months previously. The two-time Grand Slam winner denied the charge, citing self-defense. The case was referred to an independent tribunal, and following a hearing in Sydney in July, Chairperson Michael Heron upheld the charge of offensive conduct. But the suspension will only take effect from the 24th of September, meaning he's free to captain Australia in the second-round qualifier against Belgium in Sydney this weekend. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figure Lungwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It has gone exactly 37 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. We turn our focus once again to the G20. But now the question is around infrastructure and infrastructure development and infrastructure readiness. Roads, water systems and service delivery are under the spotlight as South Africa prepares to host the G20 summit in November. In December last year, the country assumed the G20 presidency and is now preparing to welcome the various representatives of the world's 20 major economies. With just over 2 months to go, the question is how long the upgrades will endure after the two-day event. Zara Groenewald reports.
Having assumed the G20 presidency on the 1st of December 2024, government and municipal leaders have made visible cleanup operations and infrastructure upgrades a top priority. Roads, lighting and stormwater systems along key routes in Gauteng are being refurbished ahead of the event. But with crumbling infrastructure and persistent service delivery concerns, President Cyril Ramaphosa says this shouldn't be a once-off job.
I saw how even the driveways, even the roads were really in a terrible and sorry state, with weeds along the path and with the rails having been damaged and paper all over and dirt. And I painted that picture to the mayor and I said, this must end. We must deliver a better looking Johannesburg, and it must not only be done for the G20, it must be done beyond the G20.
Johannesburg Mayor Dada Morero, who will co-host the U20 gathering of global mayors with Tshwane Mayor Nasipi Moya later this month, says for tangible action to come out of G20 resolutions, cities must take center stage.
Cities are the beating heart of global governance. Consider this: today, over 55% of the world's population live in cities. By 2050, that figure will rise to nearly 70%, and cities already generate more than 80% of the global GDP, and they consume almost 2/3 of the world's energy.
Together with the urban focus, water infrastructure has been singled out as a key priority. Morero says more than 40 reservoirs are over half a century old and in urgent need of refurbishment.
We're also refurbishing our water reservoirs because our water infrastructure is in dire strain and requires us to intervene. I think we have also raised about 500 million just to address issues on the reservoirs. It's not sufficient. We've got about 45 of our reservoirs that are no longer in good state. They're 50 years and older. Therefore, they require refurbishment. So we're focused on them. In this financial year, I think we've made a commitment of about 24 of the 45 to try and bring them to a good state of functioning.
Although much still needs to be done, Tshwane Mayor Nasipi Moya insists that the G20 and the U20 discussions that precede it are vital for Africa's place in the global conversation.
This is more than a milestone in the calendar. It is the culmination of determined advocacy to claim Africa's place in reshaping global governance. It is the moment when African perspectives, shaped by resilience and guided by Ubuntu, move to the center of the global conversation.
With roads, lights and water systems under pressure, preparations for the G20 are driving visible upgrades. But the real test will be whether these improvements carry lasting benefits for South Africans beyond November. Zara Groenewald, SABC News, Johannesburg.
It is exactly 4:41 Central African time. She takes us straight to our C-suite.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
So in our C-suite today, we have Victor Nemukula, Managing Director of Shimani Industrial Equipment, a South African-based industrial and construction equipment provider. Now, Nemukula is a former sales and marketing director at some of the country's leading daily and weekend publications. Victor Nemekula describes his leadership approach as both visionary and grounded in practical execution. Today, his company, Humani Industrial Equipment, is a leader in South Africa's industrial and construction equipment sector. He joins us now on the line. A very warm welcome to the C-Suite, sir. Welcome, Victor. Are you with us? It doesn't seem like Victor, either he can't hear us, but we certainly cannot hear him. Victor, can you hear us? Are you with us? I don't know if you're muted, Victor. All right, let's try once again. We'll take him back to production and see if we can get him back on the line. He is Victor Nemekula, our guest this afternoon on the C-Suite. And there you go. I did hear a voice coming through. So, Victor, welcome. Good to have you with us. And I'm glad that we did finally get connected. And I must say, when I was reading and just noticed that you moved from sales and marketing to pursue a career in the industrial and construction equipment space, that looks like such a huge leap. What informed that? Why did you leave?
When I left, I wanted to start my own business. And then the Humani opportunity came by. I joined it before it started, so I'm the founding managing director of the business. And we started it in joint ventureship with Gosco, who are an established player in the industrial equipment market. And Humani has been in operation ever since. So it was an opportunistic chance that came by because I hardly knew much about the industry.
And that's really the interesting part. You know, people might end up, quote unquote, upgrading within the same sector, but for you it was something completely different. Can you talk to us about how that opportunity actually came about and how this joint venture, this partnership between yourself and Bosco actually came to life? What made you think that you could actually really do this, an industry where you were basically a virgin? You had no idea what actually happens in that particular sector.
Yeah, so I was starting a business in the waste management. So I was leaving a job and I wanted to start my own business. Coincidentally, Gosco was also looking for a partnership with a black-owned company in order for that company to sell and be a dealer for Gosco group of companies. So that is how the whole journey started. And that was 10 years ago.
Now, what would you highlight as perhaps some of the biggest learning curves for you as you initiated yourself into a new space?
Well, you know, the industrial equipment industry is nothing like anything that I've been involved in the past. It's very capital intensive. And when you start kind of a business, you can't start it without a sufficient capital to run it because it is part of, it is comprised of moving parts. You need the banks on the one hand to finance your customers. You need, very specific skills because it's a very tight industry and with a very shortage of skill, particularly for black people at a senior management level. When I came into the industry, it was exclusively white at the top. And that's one of the lessons. But also, you don't come into the industry with preconceived ideas in terms of what you're going to do. You let the industry to lead you and to learn and develop, and you must be very open-minded. Where we started 10 years ago and where we are today, it's a completely different journey. And the lessons were huge. And you also learn that there are industries that we as black people don't even know that they exist, particularly at a senior managerial level. So, I mean, for many years, and I think for up to now, I'm probably one of the very few senior black managers in the industry. And it's the industry that is virtually unknown. I mean, you go to macro, you see a forklift. It never occurs in your mind that there is such an industry called a forklift industry. You go to the port, there are huge port handling equipment. And it's an industry that most of us don't know that it exists for some reason or the other.
And I wonder about this, Victor, and you literally sort of answered my next question, because I wanted to ask you around the issue of transformation. It's over 30 years now into democracy as far as South Africa is concerned. There was at least the first decade of quote unquote the new South Africa where you could understand being the first black to do this, the first black to do that. But are we over that now? Have we actually developed enough black people in key positions that were previously exclusively reserved for white people?
No. We need to change course. The entire supply chain, the senior management in the industry is almost exclusively white. You would still find a whole organization with not even one black executive. So we are far off. I mean, in some of the industries, particularly this industry, we are still pre-1994. There are simply no black managers.
And that's
and
the
you will
reason.
find that you will find that a senior black person is a sales guy. So no, we are still far off.
So that's the reason why, Victor, policies like broad-based black economic empowerment and BEE were put in place in order to facilitate this transfer of skills, transfer of knowledge. Why is this not happening? Is it a policy issue? Is it a willingness issue? What exactly are the reasons behind it?
A problem is implementation and enforcement. They virtually, I don't know. I mean, this industry is probably not very well known. I don't know of the enforcement ever happening in the industry. So we've got good legislation, we've got good laws, and when you read some of the laws, they are well thought through, but they are, it's as good as a piece of paper because it's not being implemented and it's not being enforced. So as a result, even some of the large-scale companies, they would rather buy toilet papers and some low-value items than where the crux of the matter is in terms of the engine of the economic growth. Because forklift industry and the port handling industry are part of the logistics industry, and they are at the core of economic growth. You only start seeing the uptake in the forklift industry to see that the economy is growing.
That's right.
So some of the disappointments of the past 30 years.
I mean, so unfortunate that time is not on our side, but really, really quickly, I know that you're also operating outside of South African borders now, and if you could also just touch on your locally branded forklift range, Bega, as we wrap up this afternoon.
Yeah, so we launched the first South African branded forklift, Bega forklift, and obviously Shumani is an African name. So we wanted a product that resonates with the South Africans as we embark on a journey of transformation for the industry. I mean, even though it's still far off from transformation, but I mean, we wanted to be one of the first that resonate with the workers, with the employees, and with the changing nature of our economy. So it's a forklift that we source from China, and we brand it back with our own colors. And the uptake in the market has been short of phenomenal.
Well, we wish you continued success as you go from strength to strength, and also continued transformation in the industry at senior managerial level, as you've spoken. Victor Nemokula, it's been a pleasure hosting you in the C-suite this afternoon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. That's Victor Nemokula. He is the managing director for Shumani Industrial Equipment, a South African-based industrial and construction equipment provider, as you've heard, making strides as well across the continent. He takes us to exactly 4:52.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
To the Eastern Cape now in South Africa. The province is currently experiencing a severe economic and employment crisis. Now, according to the latest quarterly labour force survey, a staggering 83,000 jobs were lost in the province. This is just between January and March of 2025. More jobs are set to be lost in the coming months. This as the likes of Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company close its doors. That's a story that we've covered here on Africa in Business. You'll remember also Aspen workers, the pharmaceutical, announcing 923 cuts on top of 208 jobs already lost this year. Let's break this down a bit further to find out what the implications are and how workers and unions are reacting to this. We're joined by the national spokesperson for the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Cosatu Zanele Sabela. A very good afternoon to you, Zanele. Good to have you with us on Africa in Business.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us.
Perhaps let's start first, Zanele, with an understanding of what the main reasons are, the main reasons behind the recent wave of job losses in the Eastern Cape. I know everybody's speaking about US tariffs. Can it really all be attributed to that, or are there other factors that we should be mindful of?
So you'll know that the Eastern Cape has a lot of the manufacturing in the automotive sector is really concentrated in the Eastern Cape. And so in terms of that, you have actually seen that early this year, when President Trump got into the White House, he did indicate that he would be looking at, tariffs. And so what has happened is, it actually, even before the tariffs, came into effect on the 8th of August, what then started to happen is there was a drop in exports. Literally, there was a drop in exports, and so the impact is really being felt in the Eastern Cape. We saw Goodyear, which has been in the Eastern Cape, for a very long time, and was one of the major employers there. Closed down, shut down its doors, and then 900 workers lost their jobs there. And you'll understand that when, for one worker, it's estimated that, they support about 7 people. So when you look at that, then the impact is that much more devastating when you look at that. And so Ford has also come in to say that it is looking at redesigning its operations, and because of that, then they're talking to unions about cutting 470 jobs. So it is quite worrying, and there was it in July that Mercedes-Benz actually halted production for like a month. Which also gives us it makes us very nervous, because then what does that say? I mean, why are they halting production? So it makes us very nervous, and we're looking at that, and in the Eastern Cape, unemployment in South Africa is, Kosatu, we look at the expanded definition of unemployment, because, it includes the people that are now discouraged and they've looked for work and couldn't find it, and now they've stopped. But then the fact of the matter is they are still unemployed. And nationally, that figure is sitting at 42.9%. But when you look at the Eastern Cape, it's sitting at around 46%. And so it is already really worrying. But then with the implementation of that 30% tariffs from the U.S., South Africa's second, largest trading partner, we are really nervous. It's really worrying.
And do you believe that provincial or even national government has done enough to intervene in the crisis? And what have they done?
And so, you know with the case of ArcelorMittal, ArcelorMittal did announce early this year that, they said they had been in talks with government for more than a year, and that, nothing was coming right. There were losses, and they wanted to close their mill in Newcastle and Vereeniging, and that would result in 3,000 direct jobs being lost. But then when you looked at then the complete value chain, the impact could be as much as 100,000 jobs that would be impacted. And so because of that 100,000 jobs, we were all very, we all jumped up. And then government came to the party. The UIF said they would be giving TERS, which is the temporary employer-employee relief, for 12 months, so that ArcelorMittal doesn't have to pay salaries. But then there were also more than, we're talking about 1.68 billion that was given to ArcelorMittal to prop it up. And so, but then it is really disappointing at this point to know that ArcelorMittal plans to close at the end of this month.
Zanele, unfortunately, we are going to have to leave it at that just because of time. But certainly the plight of the workers and the jobs that are being impacted in the Eastern Cape, certainly not a light issue. We thank you so much for putting all that into perspective.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's been our pleasure. Thank you, Zanele. There's Zanele Sabela. She's the national spokesperson for the Congress of South African Trade Unions, COSATU. Bring us to 2 minutes to 5 p.m. as we say bonjour to Annie Kalonji.
Bonjour Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Alors tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique, il s'agira de l'ex-président Laurent Gbagbo de la Côte d'Ivoire qui a reçu plusieurs dirigeants de l'opposition au lendemain du rejet de sa candidature pour la présidentielle d'octobre prochain. Nous allons également parler de l'avenir de la communauté économique monétaire de l'Afrique centrale après les travaux de sa 6e session ordinaire qui s'est achevée mercredi à Bangui. Et nous parlerons également en Guinée de l'artiste Singleton qui a été condamné à 1 an de prison avec sursis pour homicide involontaire. C'est tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci beaucoup, Thami.
Merci beaucoup, Annie. That's how we come to the end of Africa in Business for this Thursday afternoon. Thank you to our team, Jwalane Tulengwape on the news desk, economics desk, Nosipo Zuma, sporting desk, Figile Lingwati, production team, Mabo Buloka, our producer, technical producer, Bongi Moyo, and social media talent, Butelezi. I'm Thami Ngubeni. This has been Africa in Business on Channel Africa as we make way now for the French desk and Vue d'Afrique. Au revoir.
Annie Kalonji sur Channel Africa.
Nous allons danser au son